and I commend this bill to the House.
The Honourable David Parker.
Mr Speaker, I can't do better than repeat the words of New Zealand Steel in their very clearly expressed concerns about this bill when they described that this bill takes New Zealand backwards and undermines the interests of New Zealand producers facing unfair competition from overseas. They said New Zealand Steel does not support the bill. In our view, the bill, as is currently drafted, and it hasn't changed materially in this regard, 1, is an unnecessary and radical shift in New Zealand's trade policy. There is no principled reason why New Zealand producers should be expected to compete with goods illegally dumped here below their cost of production offshore. 2, will result in a materially weakened anti-dumping regime which does not protect local producers and may chill investment and manufacturing capacity. In that regard, the bill moves away from what is prescribed in the WTO anti-dumping rules and does not require an unfettered public interest exception. And 3, is a significant threat to New Zealand industry. The bill in its current form will result in unintended and significant consequences, including the chilling of investment and possible closure and job losses for many major businesses unless amendments are made as outlined in the submissions that followed, and those amendments were not made. Sir, this legislation is not only unnecessary, it makes the situation worse for major New Zealand producers of goods that face dumping risks. Sir, this opens New Zealand ministers to being heavied by some of the biggest players in the world. We see, there is a changing world dynamic. China is quite rightly taking its place as one of the global forces in the world. It was until the 1800s one of the major superpowers in the world. It went through a period of relative decline. The ascendancy of America saw them as the ascendant global power. Russia was up there for a while. Russia fell. China is on the rise, and they truly are one of the world's superpowers. Sir, with those powers also come responsibilities, and those responsibilities should be able to be met if they comply with WTO rules. Sir, we know not from what the government's told us, because this lacking transparency government is always, or not always, but is often hiding from New Zealand the true reality of what's happening. We only know that there were threats against New Zealand corporates as a consequence of the suggestion that New Zealand would investigate whether there was dumping of steel within New Zealand, because Vernon Small at the Dominion broke the story. And it's pretty obvious if you read between the lines that the reason he was able to break that story is that there are people within the arms of government who do not like what is happening underneath this, under the governance of the National Party in respect of issues like this. At the time, no, that's correct. That's true. That's correct. The government is still redacting and refusing to disclose to the public the correspondence relating to threats that are alleged to have been made against New Zealand exporters into China in the kiwi fruit industry and the dairy industry if New Zealand investigated Chinese steel imports and looked at whether we should have anti-dumping additional tariffs on imported steel as a consequence. Is that something that New Zealand should be able to look at? Most clearly it is. As New Zealand Steel say in this same submission, there is between 400 and 700 million tonnes of excess steel production in the world every year at the moment, and other countries like the United States and the whole of Europe have actually decided that some of the steel exports from China are being dumped on overseas markets. China has excess steel making capacity, and they're selling, according to the Americans and the European, into other countries at less than cost. The tariffs in America in respect of some subsets of steel, like stainless steel, have been increased to as high as 160%. The tariffs, higher tariffs that have been introduced in Europe, if memory serves me correct from what I looked at last night, have ranged from about 18 to 60%. The New Zealand government hasn't been willing to look at it despite complaints from New Zealand Steel. Now, what's the effect of this legislation on it? The effect of this legislation is very unwise because it makes it easier for large players in the world, and I'm not saying China would ever do this, but we know from our history that big players occasionally do, whether it's the United States or Europe, and we've seen their actions in respect of some of their exports over the years as well. We know that some of these big players do throw their weight around and try and pressure New Zealand, saying, "Oh, look, if you do something over there, we're going to prejudice you in some other area of trade." And this bill sets up a system that encourages it, because it introduces a discretion for the minister not to prevail with either an inquiry or anti-dumping duties, even if there's evidence that they would be justified. That is bad law, and that is why Business New Zealand, as well as New Zealand Steel, have come along together with other submitters and said, this is wrong for New Zealand manufacturers, and then the government says, trust us, trust us. Well, why would we trust this government when their record on exports is so absolutely appalling? We have a country that is investing far too much in selling houses to one another at ever-inflated prices, which is where so much of the investment capital is wasted in New Zealand, and not enough in the productive sector that grows exports to the rest of the world. And that's why New Zealand's productivity growth is virtually zero. Our productivity isn't going up, and as a consequence of that appalling record on productivity, our exports as a percentage of the economy are going backwards. Backwards. When the government was elected in 2008, they promised to increase New Zealand's exports from 30 to 40% of GDP. What's happened? The opposite. They've gone backwards. They went back to 26% of GDP. They're around 27% of GDP. And what's the government done? Oh, they've actually changed their target. Have you noticed that? They've changed their target. They put the 40% of getting to 40% of GDP for exports. You never hear them talking about that. Now their new target, which is just about meaningless, says they want a certain percentage of our exports to be covered by free trade agreements. Well, yeah, good. We actually like free trade agreements. We don't like the government selling out. Well, actually, they say they bring TPP into this, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad they have. No, Mr. Chairman, they can't yell out TPP, put that on the record, and you deny me the right to respond to that point, sir. TPP is different from the Chinese free trade agreement that we negotiated, because under the Chinese free trade agreement, we didn't trade away the right of a future government to ban overseas buyers of our land, but the national government have in the TPP. And even now they refuse to try and renegotiate that. Having broken the bipartisan approach on trade in respect of that important aspect of sovereignty, they sit there and pretend that they're superior. They cannot escape the fact that exports are going backwards, that their failed policies after 9 years in government have exports lower as a percentage of GDP when they promised to increase them from 30 upwards to 40% of GDP. Sir, this is very poor legislation. Business New Zealand are right. New Zealand Steel are right. This is going to take New Zealand manufacturers backwards over time, and the minister is creating pressure points that can be used to distort what should happen where dumping is found to occur.
I call up Brett Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a